Like to me, it sounds like you want for our marriage to be um, more transparent for the kids.
Well, so for instance, let's just say for us, and I don't want to put my parents on blast, so I'm not going to try to determine what was going on behind closed doors that I didn't know about. But like for us, as we deal with issues, I think it's imperative that we face them head on and say, what are these issues? What is the cause of them, and why are we experiencing them? And then strive to dig at the root of that. So that's always been my personality or my angle, try to dig at the root of a problem, try to get it at its core, um, as opposed to trying to brush over things. Like how many people in marriage brush over their issues thinking they'll just go away, or thinking, well, when we go to the movies next Friday, we'll forget all about it. You know what I mean? I don't see how that is useful. I think it's more useful to deal with the struggle of, okay, we're not communicating well. We're not being honest enough, to really meld well together. So in terms of what our kids will see, our kids may very well see more conversations that are not 100% peachy keen, because we're trying to work through some things. But they'll also see resolutions.
Well, you hope so.
Well, as far as we're actively striving to work out our issues, there will be resolutions. Um, so at least that's what I assume. I think it would be useful to look in the Bible and see what did God intend for marriage to be, for us to get a good gauge on that. But before we do that, you got any general comments?
Um, I think it's hard to be. I think it's interesting because it's like, okay, in part, like from the children's perspective, in part you don't want your kids to think, okay, everything's perfect, everything's peachy keen, as you said. Um, you want it to be more real for them, but at the same time, I feel like if you have parents that are always arguing, always fighting, mom's always crying, dad's always yelling, that kind of thing, that can also, I feel like, make kids then grow up and be like, I never want to get married. Like my parents hated each other and they just
Yeah.
stuck it out because they felt like they had to. Because I've seen that. I've talked to people that were that way. They were like, I'm never getting married. Like it, or they're like, my parents had a miserable marriage and they just stuck it out for each other. Like if I feel like sometimes people have very different personalities, and I think marriage asks that it's almost imperative that you have to give. Like it's like someone has to give for the other to. I was listening to like a Jordan Peterson conversation with his two kids, and he's talking to one of his sons, and he was talking about how you never really meet in the middle. It's always someone either deciding, okay, I'm gonna drop this, or I'm gonna give in, or I'm gonna, it's never a meet in the middle. It's like someone's always compromising more for the other person to, you either have to let some of it go, or maybe once some of the emotion dies, you realize, oh, it's not that serious, and then you can compromise or whatever. I think marriage definitely is that. It's not a meet in the middle. And I think, it is a compromise, and I think hopefully both people are willing to compromise and not always feel like their needs need to be met over the others.
Well, I agree. I want to address one of the things you said. You mentioned an opposite extreme. So, for instance, I mentioned one side of an extreme where people put on this front to themselves and to their children that nothing is wrong, when obviously we're sinners, so things are going to go wrong.
Right.
But you mentioned the opposite extreme of people always fighting and yelling and crying. But that's not, at at least in my perspective, that's not what it looks like to constantly work out your issues, to constantly face your problems. It doesn't have to be that. But maybe there's a little bit of your personality there that is not as eager to press on those issues, to where pressing on issues might seem like that to you, maybe.